and welcome back to another Tea Time with Owen. I'm your host, Owen, a person of many projects and many passions. Well, I see you enjoyed the first episode so much that you decided to stop by for the second episode. I really appreciate that, guys. Thank you very much. Anyways, for this edition of the program, I am going to do my first edition of My Favorite Things. And today's My Favorite Things is going to focus on pop culture, more specifically TV, as I am going to reveal my 5 favorite TV shows of all time. Starting with, of course, Friends. Because as you can see, I've got the Central Perk t shirt on right here, which actually came from New York. It was a gift from my family because they went to New York a few weeks ago, and I thought it was really cool when I saw the shirt. It was like, oh, Central Perk, Friends. Awesome. I definitely need one of those. And they got it for me, so I thought that was really cool. Anyways, the 3 things I can say that this show does really well is that it has a great cast with Joey, with Matt LeBlanc as Joey, with Jennifer Aniston as Rachel, with Lisa Kudrow as Phoebe, our favorite weirdo. David Schwimmer was Ross. I can never, for some reason, name the actor that played Chandler Bing, but rest in peace to him because he was very good as an actor, and I honestly think it's a shame that he's no longer with us. But, anyways, as I was saying, there was a great cast. Like, you could tell that a lot of characters had good chemistry. Like Joey and Chandler, they would get into all these hijinks and mischief that you just want to see to the very end. Like the time that he and or the time that Joey and Chandler made a bet, I think it was with Monica and Rachel over their apartment. And Joey and Chandler wound up winning because for some reason, Rachel could not name what Chandler Bing does for a living. And I think her answer was, oh, he's a transponder. He's a transponder. And Monica goes, that's not even a word. And it's one of the most valid crash outs of all time for Monica. And that was just a really funny thing there. The show also has its really memorable moments. Like, there's this one episode, Ross gets this sandwich from Monica of Thanksgiving leftovers that he calls the moist maker. One day, Ross is at work, and one of his coworkers opens the fridge in the break room and takes his sandwich. And so the coworker starts eating the sandwich, and eventually it's too big for him to even finish. And Ross comes in to see that the guy's taken the sandwich, and then the guy goes, well, it was quite large. I think the rest of it's in the trash. And Ross with one of the most valid crash outs of all time. Because trust me, people, we all have this one asshole that takes our lunch and then doesn't even finish it. You know, we all have that one person that does this. So we can all relate to Ross Geller getting upset and going, you threw my sandwich away. My sandwich. My sandwich. I just think that is one of the most hilarious scenes in the history of the show. Because it's just really funny how this guy didn't see that he was going to get into this by eating Ross's sandwich. And it was just really funny. And then, of course, you also have the great line of, we were on a break with Rachel and Ross. And it's just, that one's still hilarious to me. And of course, you have my favorite character of the entire show, Mr. How You Doing himself, Joey, Joey Tribbiani, the struggling actor trying to find his big break. So Joey, he's just hilarious. I love the guy. And I've always been a big fan of Matt LeBlanc because this is honestly some of his best work. But he also did some really good work in that one show called Man with a Plan, where it's just him and other actors and actresses. And he just does a great job of being himself and being a great actor on that show. He really carries that show as a main character because obviously he was the main character in that show. And yeah, you just have a lot of really cool moments. And there was another one. There's this episode where Joey, Ross, and Chandler, I think, they all go to the New York Rangers game. And who do they happen to be playing? My favorite hockey team of all time, the Pittsburgh Penguins. And obviously, I was hooked from the get-go with this scene. As now, you got the Rangers against the Penguins on an episode of Friends. Because to me, that was just really cool to see that. Because I've always been a big fan of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So now it's like, well, now I know I got to keep watching because they brought in my favorite hockey team now. So I got to keep watching this. And what winds up happening is during the game, one of the guys on the ice smacks the puck too hard. It goes up in the stands and it hits Ross in the face. I don't know exactly where. I thought it was his nose or it might have been his eye, but it's just hilarious because it's like, poor Ross. The guy cannot catch a break. But yeah, this show just had a lot of really good moments and a lot of really good episodes. And I think kind of the way it ended with everybody moving on was really a good thing. Because you got to think about it. How else are you going to end a show like that? Because these friends have been around in each other's lives for such a long time. And obviously, I think that post Friends, these characters would still kind of be around each other, considering, as I said before, they've been a part of their lives for such a long time. So I think it had a really good ending, and it's really one of those shows that I don't think you ever could bring back. Because obviously, we don't know everything with the backstage issues. Like, some people hated each other that worked on the show with each other. So, I mean, it's been a long time. Time does heal old wounds and all that. But I just think Friends ended on really high notes. And then they did this one special a few years ago that I actually watched on Amazon. I think it was Amazon. And they brought back the majority of the cast to the set. And they just kind of reminisced and played games that brought out quotable moments from the show that I thought was really cool. So yeah, I just don't think Friends is one of those shows you could ever bring back. Hang on a second. I forgot to put that sign up before I started recording. Because I always keep that sign with me. And it's just an important sign that I like to have on my set. But anyways, I think it ended really nicely. And as I said, it's just one of those shows that I don't think you could really bring back. And of course, my other favorite character in the show was Phoebe. Because guys and gals, friends and pals, let's just all face it. We're all Phoebe sometimes, She represents that side of us that we don't like to show a lot, but sometimes it comes out in different moments. So, Phoebe was just that just that lovable weirdo that you really like to see. Because, of course, we have the Smelly Cat song that goes, Smelly cat, what are they feeding you? Smelly cat, it's not your fault. And of course, she tried to one time write a holiday song. I can't remember the lyrics to it exactly, but I remember it being a really funny bit. But yeah, honestly, this was a really good show, and it did a lot of really good things. So this is definitely on my list of all-time favorite TV shows for a very good reason. Now, my next favorite all-time favorite TV show is Frasier. Now, I'm willing to admit that for a good majority of my life, I had no idea that Kelsey Grammer was on Cheers or that he had his own show, Frasier. Because my first memory of this guy is him being the voice of Sideshow Bob on The Simpsons. So I was not familiar with Kelsey Grammer, the actor. I was just familiar with Kelsey Grammer, the voice actor. And Kelsey Grammer, the actor, oh my goodness. He is just phenomenal in this show as Frasier. Like, I could not stop watching this. It was just a great series to watch. And I picked it up around, I think it was Christmas a couple years ago. And I just loved it. It was amazing from start to finish. And you got a great cast of characters. Of course, with Kelsey Grammer playing Frasier, I was introduced to Jane Leeves playing Daphne. You had the actor that played Martin Crane, and you had David Hyde Pierce as Niles. And you have a whole cast of characters from Bob Bulldog Briscoe to Kenny Daly being the head of Frasier's station that he works at on the radio. You had Roz Doyle, his assistant, who did a really nice job. You also had the people that worked at Nervosa, the coffee place that Frasier and Niles would always go to. And you just had a great cast of who's who. Even Frasier's enemy, Cam Winston. I had to get the voice in because I just think it's funny how Frasier did that impression of him, that one episode, when he's trying to park his car and Cam Winston parks his car so far in that Frasier can't get into a space in his apartment complex, which I just thought was really funny. But yeah, it was just a really good show. And it takes place in Seattle, which is a place that I'm not really familiar with. But honestly, I learned a lot about Seattle from watching this show that it always rains there. There's a lot of coffee places, which, hey, that's not a bad thing. There's some nice parks and things like that. And yeah, I learned a lot about Seattle from watching this show. So yeah, I was really a big fan of this. Plus, I always loved how Frasier closed out his show, how he would always go, "Good day, Seattle, and good mental health." Because, as I mentioned before, I'm a big advocate for mental health. And I always loved that he closed his show that way. Because it really shows that mental health is very important. And he did a great job with the show that he did on that radio station. There was some really enjoyable guests and funny stuff that went on there. And I actually like the way that it ended with Frasier leaving to go to San Francisco. In a lot of ways, it makes a lot of sense that the characters all move on. Niles is finally out of his first divorce, or I'm sorry, his first marriage finally ends in a divorce from Maris, who, yeah, I'll just say is one of the oddest characters in the show just for the way she's written. But yeah, anyway, I really enjoyed Frasier, and it has a good ending with Daphne and Niles finally getting together. Frasier moving on to San Francisco to take a job getting his own TV show, which makes a lot of sense in terms of the way you end the show. I forget what happened to Martin exactly, but I know he wasn't in the Frasier reboot because his voice actor I'm sorry, the actor that played Martin unfortunately passed away. May he rest in peace. He did a lot of great work in his time as an actor, and he was really good when he played Martin Crane. And I like that the overall theme of the show was that Frasier and his dad, they loved each other, but they never really saw eye to eye. They were kind of two different people that liked different things. And I think that was always a great storyline for the show. And you've seen this done in other shows as well, but this show does it really well down to a T. And when Martin moves in with Frasier, obviously at first these two have a lot of problems. But eventually, as the show goes on, we see a lot of character growth. And that's another thing that this show does really well. I also like the opening things they do when it says Frasier and then you have something going on in the background. It's kind of fun. And I also like how for each season they changed up the colors of the word Frasier. I always thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, overall, I really enjoyed that show. It was a great show. I cannot recommend it enough. Moving on to my third favorite TV show of all time, and that would be Hot in Cleveland. Now, it's funny. My dad and I started binging this a long time ago when I got home from work one day. He's watching the show, and all of a sudden I start watching it, and it's kind of like, this looks really interesting because it's kind of really interesting how it starts off. You've got these three women who've all been really good friends, Elka, Victoria, and Melanie, or I'm sorry, Joy, Melanie, and Victoria on this flight from LA to Paris. But their plane has to make an unexpected landing in Cleveland. And these three start to fall in love with the city when they go to a bar, they get chili fries and they drink beer. And then they meet these guys and they all of a sudden start to realize, hey, we're more attractive in Cleveland than we were LA. So they decide to stay in Cleveland eventually. And eventually they move in with this old woman named Elka, who's played by the late great Betty White. May she rest in peace. And Elka, Betty White playing Elka is just fantastic. She did a really great job. And I really like the relationship between her and the other character, Joy, that they would just go at each other with different comebacks and different insults. But I actually read one day because for a minute I thought that Jan Leaves and uh, Betty White hated each other. But I actually read one day that no, these two, they absolutely adored each other and they got along great. And it really shows because they had that great chemistry in different scenes. So I really like that. And of course, you have this one actress. For some reason, I cannot remember her name, but I can remember she's been in several different shows. And she actually was in Frasier when she played Frasier's old babysitter, and eventually the one that falls in love with Martin Crane for a few episodes. And she also played, I think it was the dean at Sheldon's school in Young Sheldon. Like, she's been in a lot of different shows, and I think she does a lot of really good work. And she did a lot of really good work on this show, playing the struggling actress Victoria Chase. And it was like every single time during the show, we would hear her say, "Is that Victoria Chase? Oh my God, is that Victoria Chase?" And that would just be hilarious to me because it just made for a great running gag throughout the series. And that was one of the things I just really enjoyed about it. And there's a lot of really cool guest stars. The guy that played Newman in Seinfeld guest starred as one of their neighbors, Rick. And I thought that was really cool because it's like the second I saw him pop up on the screen, I was like, hey, that's Newman from Seinfeld. Wow, that's really cool. And the late great Don Rickles also guest starred on this show as Elka's first husband, or technically well, Elka's ex-husband, we'll go with that, who was in the mob and left Elka all these jewels and things. And eventually Elka would wind up getting thrown in jail over this to end season 1. And you also had William Shatner in this. When, and it's like, I'm not really that familiar with William Shatner from his work on Star Trek or anything like that. I'm familiar with him from his work in those old insurance commercials. I think it was Aflac or Progressive, something like that. But to see him just pop up on screen and do what he does best, he's just phenomenal. He's honestly one of the best actors of history. He's just amazing. And he's great in his role in a few episodes on Hot in Cleveland. He's just fantastic. And a guy that I'm not very familiar with as well, Craig Ferguson, shows up towards the latter half, I think, of it's either season 4 or 5, as Simon, Joy's love interest and the person that got her pregnant back in, I think it was England, I want to say. I'm not exactly sure if that's right. Don't quote me on that. But it's just interesting to see Craig Ferguson pop up in that role. And he just does such a great job in that role. And that's just the thing that the show did really well, was just guest appearances. You would have a who's who of old actors and actresses and new and upcoming actors and actresses, which I think this show just does really well. And it's definitely a strength of the show. And it's just really well written because you see a lot of character growth from Melanie, Joy, Victoria, and Elka, and other characters in the show as we go along. And oh yeah, the guy that played Martin Crane actually does guest star for a few episodes in Hot in Cleveland. So I just think they did a really nice job of having guest stars, making short cameos or being legitimate parts of the story. Like, that's just definitely a strength of this. And it's a really wholesome, well-written show that I'm going to be really sad when he and I finally watch the last episode of this show. Because it's just really good. And it's one of those shows that you just don't want to see it end. Because unfortunately, we lost Betty White. And it's just like with those three, they were the show. And it was just absolutely fantastic. So honestly, I'm surprised that after watching it for only a few months, I'm saying this, but I'm really not, considering it's just amazing. It's got great writing, great storylines, a great cast of characters, and amazing guest stars. I just love it. It follows the formula of what makes a great TV show down to a T. And the fact this was only on TV Land just baffles me. How did Fox, NBC, or CBS, or ABC not pick this up and say, hey, here comes our next great show that we can have on Thursdays or Fridays? How did they miss out on this show is what I just don't understand. But yeah, it's just an amazing show, and I absolutely love it. Moving on to my next favorite TV show of all time, How I Met Your Mother. This show is just fantastic from start to finish. It actually has one of my favorite moments in it where it's the day of Super Bowl 41 And that day lives forever in my heart, considering as a Colts fan, it's one of the best days in the history of the franchise. Because that night, the Colts would go on to beat the Bears in Super Bowl 41 and become world champions. And it's just funny because one night I was watching that episode and it's like, I wonder if the Colts win here or if they lose to the Bears on this show. But no, they still win and everybody is actually watching the Super Bowl. I think it was at Ted's apartment, I believe, or it might have been Barney's apartment. I forget. But yeah, I just really love that moment. And there's a lot of great episodes and a lot of great moments in this show. And the characters. You've got, of course, the great and wait for it, and wait for it, legend, wait for it, dairy, Barney Stinson. This guy is just phenomenal. Like Neil Patrick Harris, this was my first time seeing this guy. And he just blew me away because it's like, wow, this guy is so good in this role. And I couldn't stop watching to the very end because you didn't know what Barney was going to do next. Because it was just a great character and just really great writing for that character. And you have one of my other favorite actors, Peyton Seagal, playing Marshall. And Marshall is just really well written too, because sometimes he'll go along with Barney's nonsense. And so, of course, Ted Mosby, the guy that's trying to find the one, you know? So, and that's really the premise of the show is Ted is trying to find the one as he's telling the story to his kids of how I met their of how he met their mother. And I just think it's really well written. And it's just a great show. And you've also got Robin, who we all thought was going to be the one for Ted. But unfortunately, if I remember correctly, it didn't wind up being that way. It wound up being somebody else. But I was kind of bummed with that because it's like I always thought Ted and Robin were going to wind up together. Like after all their past history, they were going to actually make it work. And they were actually going to wind up together. So I was kind of crushed at the end when that didn't happen. And Marshall and Lily, they just make a great couple. Sometimes they disagree and argue, but they wind up making up in really wholesome ways. So yeah, I really love the show. It's just amazing. And when I finally finished it, I was kind of sad because it's like, man, I remember watching this show when it was still on the air and thinking it was a really good show then. But you just remember how much you really love of the show and what made you love it in the first place when you go back and watch it. And it was just a really good show, and I always enjoyed it. Now, moving on to my final favorite show of all time. So this one is kind of a funny story. One day I get home from high school and I decided to watch a little TV. And I come across this classic TV show channel and I find this show called The King of Queens. And I was like, well, okay, what's this all about? And I see Kevin James. And I love Grown Ups. The two Grown Ups movies are just amazing. We need a third Grown Ups movie because Kevin James is just phenomenal in that. And he's just a great actor overall in whatever he does because he's just amazing. And he just does a great job of portraying Doug Heffernan, this guy that works at this package delivery service called IBS. And he just does a great job of getting into all these crazy antics. Like there's this one episode where Doug decides to try out for this semi-pro football team. Doug decides to try out for this semi-pro football team. after he decides to be an assistant coach on Kirby's on a his best friend Deacon's kids football team. So he gets the idea to start getting back in shape to try out for a semi-pro football team. And his wife, Carrie, is very concerned about this. And I agree with this too, because Doug, let me just tell you, man, you are not in playing shape. And you honestly would probably not survive one season in that semi pro football league. But I can really appreciate the effort there that he's trying to do with that. And of course, you have Arthur Spooner, played by one of my favorite actors, the late great Jerry Stiller. God, I was so upset when he passed in 2020 because this guy was just amazing in this role. He played the cranky old man that does these crazy things down to a T. And sometimes Arthur would just annoy Doug to no end, and it would just be really funny. Like, there was this one moment in the show where he goes, Douglas, I would like to order pizza from this new pizza place called Domino's. And Doug just looks at him with this face of, you mean Domino's? And it's just a hilarious scene that I just busted out laughing because it's like, he read it as Domino's, but it's just Domino's. It was just really funny. And this show was just great for those funny sketches, so I really enjoyed it. You also, of course, have Deacon, who's kind of a bit of a unknown character at times, but when he hangs out with Doug, they get into these crazy antics. Like the time that they went to the Mets game and Doug ran on the field, and I think he tackled Mr. Met, which was just really funny, but you also feel kind of bad for Mr. Met. But it was just really funny, so I liked it. And it was just a funny sketch there. And also you have Doug's boss. O'Boyle was his name. I can't remember the first name, but he's played by a really good actor as well that I think also unfortunately passed away. And he just does a great job of portraying Doug's boss because he can be the serious boss, he can be the funny boss, and he's just amazing with the way he does it. So, yeah. And again, this was another show that I was just really sad when it was over. When I finally got to the last episode, it's like, oh man, this is really how the show ended. But it ended on a nice note with Doug and Carrie going to China and adopting a baby. Because as we find out, Carrie can't have kids, which really, that's one of the most heartbreaking parts of the show is when we find out Carrie can't have kids. But they go and adopt a Chinese baby, and eventually they wind up having a lot of kids in the end. So it ended on a really nice note. And Arthur still lives with them too, so the kids drive him absolutely nuts. So yeah, it was just a great show and just an amazing one that I absolutely recommend. Like honestly, I would recommend all 5 of these shows to someone that's never seen them because they're just amazing from start to finish. They're all really well written. They have great casts. They have great storylines. And it's just, they're all really great shows that I have different experiences from in my times in high school and just growing up. So I always just remember those shows very fondly. And some honorable mentions are, of course, The Big Bang Theory. And I get it. There are a lot of people out there that absolutely despise this show because of how Sheldon always got his way in the end. But I always liked the way that ended. And I was sad when that show ended because it's like, Wow, it had been a part of my life for such a long time, from watching reruns to watching the new episodes every Thursday night. So it was just sad when it was over, but it ended on a really nice note, and it made a good transition into young Sheldon. So I always thought that was good. Another one is The Office. Listen, I think Steve Carell is great in this. I think the guy that plays Dwight is great in this. I like Pam, and I like everybody that's in it, but it just doesn't make the top 5. Because there are some episodes where you scratch your head, and once Michael goes away, it kinda sucks. Because Michael is the show a lot of times. Because he's a great guy, but he is a terrible boss. And when a new company comes in, they eventually realize that he is not the best at his job, but he's just really funny. Michael Scott is one of the best characters we've ever seen. Another one I would say is Friday Night Lights. Because again, this is another show I grew up with. And one time I found it on Netflix and I just started binge watching it from start to finish because there was a lot that I forgot about that show. And that show had a really nice ending too, with Coach Taylor winning a state championship at East Dillon after Dillon ousted him as the head coach. Or I forget, I think he left Dillon on good terms and he decided to go to East Dillon or something like that. And he had a lot of really good characters in that show too, like Matt Saracen, the backup quarterback, who eventually becomes the starter because the starter gets hurt in the first episode. But Matt Saracen leads him to victory, anyways. And of course, you also got the misunderstood Tim Riggins. I'm willing to admit that I hated him a lot of times in the show because he really could have done better. But at the same time, he wound up getting his act together in the end, and he wound up turning out to be a great character. So, I really liked that show. It was a great show. And those are really a few honorable mentions there. Anyways, well, I think that really about does it for Tea Time with Owen. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. As always, be sure to leave a review on Spotify, check out clips from this episode on YouTube, and like and subscribe. And I'm going to end this a little differently, as I ended the last episode with a little bit of art. In honor of Pride Month, I decided, in support of the LGBTQIA plus community, to draw the Pride rainbow, which you may not be able to see. I've got the different colors labeled as... I didn't know that the colors of the rainbow actually had different meanings. Red means life, orange means healing, yellow means sunlight, green is nature, blue is serenity, purple is spirit, black is marginalized communities, brown is people of color. As you can see on the rainbow, the light blue and the pink. There's also white. That represents trans pride. And there's this one thing that I drew here that represents intersex pride. I know there's also other different variations of pride flags, like there's bisexual as well. But I would just like to say that I will always be an advocate for the LGBTQIA plus community. Because I think these people have been misunderstood for such a long time. And I think they're just villainized so much. And I hate it. I absolutely hate it. Because why can't we all just get along? That's why I say at the end of the shows, peace and love. Because peace and love are two great things. And combined, they're even better. So why can't we just get along? And I even wrote on here, using the colors from the rainbow, I wrote love, and I used the colors from the rainbow and the little thing I wrote here for the part on pride. Like you see the V and the E, I combined the brown and the black and the blue and the pink because I thought that'd make a nice little thing there. A nice little thing there. Hmm. But yeah, I honestly think that the LGBTQIA plus community deserves better. Trans rights are human rights. They absolutely deserve to have rights. They deserve to be treated equally. And the same thing goes for marginalized communities and people of color. We need to stop racism. We need to stop discrimination. We need to stop being so judgmental of people. And I'm not saying we can't judge, but I'm saying you can't just judge people just to judge people. You need a reason, so you can't just judge people for no reason. That's just absolutely stupid. And I would say what I think of certain things doing that, but I probably shouldn't for a number of reasons. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's been really fun working on this. And, you know, I've got a third episode coming up, as in the next episode, which you should really check that one out. I tell you what, because it's a pretty darn good one. I tell you what. Yeah, that was a Hank Hill impression, if you didn't catch my drift there. But yeah, you should definitely check that one out, because I plan on releasing these all at the same time, because as I said in the last episode, this is kind of like the pilot for this podcast. Is just these first 3 episodes are me experimenting with different things, going from the core 3 as I discussed, and just kind of trying some things out. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. And yeah, as always, peace, love. I'm out. Have a great one, guys. Enjoy the World Cup. Enjoy everything we got going on in the world of sports, pop culture, and pro wrestling.